Chapter 2. Kundalini. Vimalananda developed close personal relationships with his racehorses, visiting them regularly at the racing stables to feed them treats and love. He continued to call on his mares even after they had been retired to stud. It was on such a visit to a stud farm near Pune that the driver of the auto rickshaw in which we were travelling abruptly refused to go any further out of town, leaving us to trudge irately down the road during the heat of midday to cover the remaining half-mile. A massive heart attack a few years previously had forced Vimalananda to carry with him pills to treat angina. Perhaps it was solely the combination of the heat, the exertion, and his exasperation with the rickshaw driver that precipitated an attack that day, though there may also have been an internal reason to which I was never made privy. Whatever the cause, this particular attack was much more intense than ordinary angina, and the pills failed to relieve it. Despite his heart condition, Vimalananda had continued to smoke, and I lit a cigarette for him as he stood stock still, trying to minimize his anguish. There we were, on a deserted road, with no medicine other than the ineffectual pills, with no way to get Vimalananda to a doctor short of walking him there. As the pain had become too great for him to even walk, the only thing left to do was to move out of the road we were standing, find a place to sit quietly in the non-existent shade, and wait for destiny's gambit to unfold. As we headed toward a leafless thorn tree, Vimalananda flicked his cigarette butt despairingly into the air. He sat on the ground beneath the tree, and I stood behind him, reduced to wondering what would happen next when some inspiration caused me to look up. There in the tree was his still smouldering cigarette butt, precisely impaled on a long, sharp acacia thorn. My heart leapt into my throat. An omen. I shouted to Vimalananda to look, and when he saw it, he smiled, then started to laugh and said, "Well, well, Robbie, it looks as if I'm not going to die here after all. Nature hasn't deserted me yet." Immediately his pain began to recede. Vimalananda loved nature, and nature loved him. There is order in nature, a grand rhythm called in Sanskrit Ritam, to which all the celestial bodies promenade. Because Vimalananda habitually moved in harmony with this cosmic rhythm, the universe had become habituated to cooperate with him. When he tossed away his cigarette with a silent, desperate prayer to nature, probably something like, "Don't let me die by the side of this road," back came the answer in a sign from nature, "Don't worry, you are still safe with me." Dying cigarettes usually do not find their way to and impale themselves on acacia thorns. Perhaps a highly improbable coincidence chose to randomly occur there and then, but such coincidences happened day in and day out with Vimalananda, so a better explanation than chance is necessary. The unerring flight of that aerodynamically unsound projectile was an external reflection of the internal event which precipitated it, a cry for assistance in extremis. Vimalananda's prayer hit the cosmic bull's eye with the same accuracy and force that his cigarette hit its bull's eye, the latter event demonstrated on the gross physical plane for all to see. The former event, that was hidden within, like iron filings on a piece of paper, conform to the lines of force projected by a magnet held beneath them. The ancient law of microcosm and macrocosm tells us that there is no real difference between the vast external universe and the limited internal universe of the human body, except that the individual believes itself to be different. A human being is a living microcosm of the universe, and the universe is a living microcosm of a human being. Each cosmos affects the other. The universe affects us moment to moment, and each one of us, by our actions, influences the entire cosmos, for good or ill. The cosmos is the body of the Absolute, the vessel through which the Absolute expresses itself. Every created thing in the universe contains at least a spark of the universal consciousness, which is the Absolute, but most things cannot adequately express this consciousness. Vimalananda explains, Chit Shakti, the power of consciousness or subjectivity, identifies with the unmanifested Absolute, and Maya Shakti, the power of unconsciousness or objectivity, identifies with the world, the manifestation of the Absolute. These two Shaktis cannot exist without one another. Even in the grossest matter, there is a spark of consciousness. This is why I say that even rocks are alive, and even in the highest states of consciousness, there is a particle of Maya. As long as there is even the least sense of individuality. Once you learn the truth of the universe, you forget your own individuality and remember your true nature. Only then, when you no longer exist, does Maya no longer exist for you. The one existence in the all, and the all defines the one. Unity and duality both exist simultaneously. Wherever Chit Shakti is displayed, there is intelligence and sensation. Otherwise, there is ignorance and insensibility. The human body is a vessel into which consciousness pours according to individual capacity, filling the body via the nervous system. The spine and the spinal cord extend consciousness from the brain, the pole of greatest awareness, which is Shiva, to the coccyx, the pole of greatest density. Each body cell expresses its own sort of consciousness according to its own capacity. At the base of the subtle spinal cord in the subtle body lies the residual Shakti of individuation, an energy which remains unavailable to the individual so long as his or her consciousness remains firmly entrenched in the mundane. This energy is our personal fragment of the cosmic power of self-identification. Thanks solely to the sense of I-ness called ahamkara, which literally means I causer, we exist as individuals. When Vimalananda spoke of the ego, it was ahamkara that he meant, not the Freudian ego. Just as discrimination is the chief characteristic of the intellect, ahamkara's chief characteristic is possessiveness, that proprietary overlordship of the organism which remembers your self-definition and allows you to hold your own in the world. Ahamkara self-identifies with every cell of your body, from conception until death. You instantly die as soon as she ceases to self-identify with you. The more you identify with your individuality, your microcosm, the more she functions as your personal Maya, and the less she reflects on the macrocosm. As you identify less with your individuality, she is freed to reflect more on the macrocosm, to increase her awareness of the One. Ahamkara and Kundalini are two names for the same power, manifested in two different directions. Ahamkara connotes Maya Shakti, and Kundalini, Chit Shakti. Maya Shakti keeps you awake to the world and asleep to the Absolute, while Chit Shakti awakens you to reality and puts you to sleep with regard to worldly matters. Since the consciousness of a living being is conditioned by the matter in which it resides, the greatest Maya that we experience is the Maya of the matter which makes up our bodies. As long as we live the embodied life, each one of us participates in the play of nature, binding ourselves to the world by the things we accrete in our personalities. No incarnate being can be either wholly worldly or wholly spiritual, no matter how filled with light you may become. You never quite transcend your dark side fully, so long as you remain embodied. The expression of Shakti in the physical body is prana, the life force, the power which keeps body, mind, and spirit functioning together as a living unit. All parts of one's being require prana. Physical life, health, and longevity require that Ahamkara self-identify strongly with the individual organism, so that sufficient prana will enliven the body, while spiritual health requires Ahamkara to relinquish most of this attachment. Just as every plant requires just the proper amount of both sunshine and rain to flourish, so does a human being require just the right amounts of the sunlight of spiritual awareness and of the cloud cover of ego attachment in order to thrive. Too much spiritual burns the world out of you and makes it impossible for you to retain your body. Too much attachment drowns your consciousness in worldliness. In the ordinary human, the ego is fully identified with the body and the limited personality, and all actions are centered around this temporary self. Each microcosmic reality is influenced by every other. All of us are caught in each other's projections and are defined in large part by them. Our conscious personalities that we like to think of as stable and constant are in fact merely aggregates of ideas which we temporarily self-identify. The conscious personality is a sort of museum whose curator, Ahamkara, selects objects for display to others from the museum's warehouse, the subconscious. These objects are assembled into exhibits, the personality fragments which each act as if it were the personality while it operates. Popular exhibits enjoy a longer run, while less patronized exhibits are changed more quickly. Eventually, the museum goes out of business at the moment of death, when the ego completely forsakes the limiting personality which it has supported for so many years. Most people never notice the fluctuations of the ceaseless creation and destruction of their personalities, any more than they notice the individual frames of a film in a motion picture. This perpetual shifting of self-identification among all these personality pieces consumes tremendous amounts of energy and keeps Ahamkara quite preoccupied. Only when some life-changing event forces the issue do you begin to wake from the sleep of contentment with Maya, like the prodigal son woke to find himself dining from the pig trough, and to take the first few toddling steps toward the light of Chit. Kundalini will eventually awaken in every being in the universe. If you prefer to enjoy the vicissitudes of karma, you can wait for that awakening to dawn. Otherwise, you can actively try to find your way to that state. Vimalananda outlined the choices. Whatever you desire will eventually come to you. This is the magnanimity of nature. She will always eventually give you what you ask for. It is only a question of time. If your desire is the product of a controlled, coherent mind, you will achieve it quickly. This is how the Rishi Vishvamitra created an entire parallel universe. The forces of his austerities were so powerful that when he set his mind to it, it took shape immediately. If you desire God, you will eventually get to God. About this, there is not one iota of doubt. How long it takes you to get to God, how much of a gap there is between your desire and its achievement, depends on how much you want God. Once you become really anxious to locate God, and your mind becomes focused on this desire, you can achieve without much delay. Lord Krishna says, Bahuman Janumam Ante. Only after millions of births does an individual soul get the desire to return to God. Only after many, many rounds of physical existence does the soul finally say, Now I'm tired. Lord, tired of all this birth and death. Please take me away from all this. As the soul becomes more and more desperate, interiority develops. And if he keeps to it eventually, he achieves. The first sutra of the Brahma Sutras is Atta Atto Brahma Jinasa, which means, now there is a sincere desire for knowledge of the ultimate. The Brahma Sutras have already existed for thousands of years and will probably exist for thousands more. The use of the word Atha, meaning now, here indicates that there is no limitation of time when it comes to spiritual advancement. Whether it is today or 10,000 years into the past or 1,000,000 years into the future, Atha means whenever there is a sincere desire for spiritual knowledge. Now is thus different for everyone. Right now is the now of the Brahma Sutras for all those of us who are trying to grope our way back to God in spite of the terrific Maya which assails us. The Maya which assails us is our own, of course, and that of our friends, neighbors, and other co-conspirators who share a consensus reality. Most people do not want to rock the boat, much less go overboard, and many do not take kindly to the deflection of their fellows. Vimalananda used to say, human beings are nothing but sheep. I used to be in a flock of sheep, but I ran away. So it's no surprise that everyone else, all the so-called normal people, think I'm insane, or at least abnormal. And I think the same about them. Only one of us can be right. Only those brave enough to disturb the somnolence of the world around them and shout that the emperor is nude possess the strength to withstand the censure of the remaining sheep. Those who shout, beware of Maya, malign Maya, for Ma always only gives us that which we ask for. When we call on the goddess to ask her for mundane boons, which bind us to limited forms, she appears to us as Maya. When we pray to her power and energy, she manifests as Shakti. And to those few who relate to her maternally, she reveals herself as Ma, God the Mother. Those who remain stuck in Maya do so because they do not try to redirect their urge to individuation from Maya to Chit. They allow themselves to be carried along by the current of their lives and their neighbors' lives. Aghoris never permit themselves to be passively defined by the external environment. They define themselves, and by doing so, define their surroundings. Vimalananda's control of an awakened Kundalini gave his self-expression such accuracy and force that incidents which would be out of the ordinary for most of us, like that of the cigarette and the thorn, became commonplace in his life. He never hesitated to define his surroundings, even if doing so landed him in hot water. One day, one of those people who call themselves Bhagwan, which means God, was having a big meeting at the Chowpatty, which is Bombay's downtown beach. They were charging 25 rupees to get in. I didn't want to go in the first place, especially to see someone selling spirituality like that. But one of my friends insisted that I must see this great saint, and he paid my way. Everyone who went to the saint was supposed to bring along a flower. I said hell with that, and didn't take along any flower or anything else. When we got there, the so-called Bhagwan told everyone to take his or her ego, put it into the flower, and then put it at the Guru's feet. He called this the great Mohini Prayoga. When it was my turn, I went up to him, and he looked at me and made a gesture to say, "Where is your flower?" I told him, "Please let me know one thing. If I put my ego into a flower, I will die, fat, right here. It is because of my ego that I am alive. My ego self-identifies with this body, and if it were to leave, my body would immediately become limp and dead. Then how would I be talking to you here? So will you please explain to me how to do it? How to put my ego into a flower?" He looked at me in a peculiar way, and then looked at one of his disciples, who caught the cue and told me to get out. I thought I might be beaten, the way all his disciples gathered around us and threatened us. So he left. This was the same fellow who advises his disciples that they can go into samadhi by putting all their energy into the sex center, awakening Kundalini, and having a great cosmic orgasm. What nonsense! Has Kundalini become so cheap? You know, in India, you can get away with anything in the name of religion. Ahamkara uses the body as ballast for the mind, that it may not drift away and be lost like a runaway balloon on a breezy day. When Kundalini awakens before death, she will try to return to and unite with her opposite pole, the pole of greatest awareness, which is Shiva, by reversing the outward projection of energy which led to incarnation. While she slumbers, she supports the body. Once she is aroused, and throws back the covers which bind her down, the body-mind-spirit complex starts to unravel as the life force is released from its bondage to the organism. If your awakening Kundalini unites totally with her Shiva, you will cease to exist, since nothing will remain to identify you with your body. If she awakens slowly enough that you can digest the tremendous energies which are released as she lets go of everything that has been holding her down, you will become a man or woman of God. If, however, she awakens too quickly to be controlled, and too slowly to kill you outright, you will be catapulted into the maelstrom of a spiritual emergency, a Kundalini crisis. Some modern writers inaccurately blame all human illnesses on such spiritual crises. While it is true that all disease is due directly or indirectly to ahamkara, to one's sense of ego and identity, all neuroses are not signs of incipient Kundalini arousal. And while a Kundalini crisis may produce a nervous breakdown, every nervous breakdown is not a spiritual emergency. Most of those who maintain that the awakening of Kundalini is the root cause of all their imbalances are merely experiencing the consequences of her first stirrings from sleep. This is more a crisis of Ahamkara than of Kundalini. The physio-Kundalini process, touted by some as a form of natural stress relief, is merely the preliminary purification of the ethereal nerves to which Kundalini will eventually move. The awakening of Kundalini is a stress release only in the sense that, as the bonds of body and personality that hold Kundalini down are undone, the energy that has been used to self-identify with these stresses is released from the organism to otherwise allocate. The awakening of Kundalini releases all stresses, not merely those which produce neuroses. Relief of neuroses is not regeneration of identity. If Kundalini be triggered suddenly in an unprepared nervous system, the shock produced resembles that delivered to an unsuspecting toddler who grasps a live wire. When an unreconstructed personality tries to resist Kundalini, consciously or unconsciously, she may fry nerves and blow out endocrine fuses, shorting out the nervous system at its weakest point and blowing a hole in the victim's aura. Since the aura's job is to insulate us physically from one another and from disembodied influences, holes in the aura permit all sorts of chaotic negative vibrations, including even ethereal parasites, to enter the individual's field as they like and spread ruin. If the individual remains functional, Kundalini may inflate and empower his or her limitations. That person into whose genitals Kundalini is diverted full force, for example, will begin to live, eat, and breathe sex, and may misidentify as spiritual experiences the colossal lusts which arise. Or should Kundalini become lodged in the digestive organs, insatiable hunger may supervene. Even if overt calamity is avoided, worse dangers await, for the ensuing catharsis can actually reinforce the limitations of the personality instead of releasing them. Those half-baked spiritual aspirants, called ardhadaga, literally half-burned in Sanskrit, who permit the power to swell their heads, like gas inflating a balloon, may believe themselves to have achieved exalted states. Because the power of Kundalini that buoys them confers an aura of seeming truth to their words, they may shoot up to the heights of self-confidence as pseudo-gurus, commanding others with confident persuasiveness to follow them until one day the pressure of temptation becomes too great and there is a cataclysmic fail. Such self-inflation may proceed insidiously, as Gopi Krishna observes. The desire for power, the yearning for mental conquest, often accompanies the activity of Kundalini in the intellectual center, causing a slightly intoxicated condition of the brain too subtle to be noticed by the subject himself or by his uninformed companions, however erudite and intelligent they may be. From Gopi Krishna, page 176. A spiritual aspirant may not intend to go wrong, but the power of even a half-awakened Kundalini often proves to be dangerous, which illustrates the great danger in the notion that all one's problems will be solved if one can just awaken Kundalini. Problems are solved if and only if Kundalini awakens in a slow, controlled way. When she does awaken in a controlled way, she awakens slowly and reveals herself gradually. Only very rarely, as with Vimalananda, does she shine forth in nearly fully developed form, almost from the start. And what many people believe to be the culmination of their spiritual practices is thus really only the beginning. Only a brief, tantalizing disengagement of Kundalini from her normal self-identification with the mundane. Should this happen to you, You must then methodically follow up on it with measures to guide and channel her if you hope to survive, because Kundalini progressively unties every knot that binds that personality together. Though I had been introduced to the idea of Kundalini before I met Vimalananda, she became real for me only after I began to glimpse her particular path through his life. Because he was concerned to remove the idea of quick achievement from my mind, he never sat me down and said, "This is what Kundalini is all about." Instead, he provided me with little bites of information from time to time, encouraging me to digest each morsel thoroughly and assimilate it efficiently. As he liked to say, never be in a hurry, start with a sip and end with the bottle. The long conversation reproduced below did not occur in one sitting. Various snippets have been spliced together to provide an overall glimpse of his approach to Kundalini Yoga. Self-identification. Actually, there is no difference between the Kundalini Shakti and the Adya, the original Shakti of the universe, except that the Kundalini Shakti has become individualized. Vimalananda was not one to repeat himself. As soon as he began to speak about something of interest to me, I was expected to drop whatever I was doing and listen. Usually he picked moments when I was engrossed in some mundane matter, like reading the newspaper, since drawing my attention to his words would disengage my mind, at least temporarily, from this attachment to the mundane. That is why I call the Kundalini Shakti the ego, the ability to self-identify, to treat something as part of oneself is ego. As long as the Kundalini Shakti self-identifies with the body, she remains asleep. Once she awakens, she searches for her mate Shiva, that fragment of the universal consciousness without which an individual cannot exist. When they merge, that's it. The play is over. It's something like an electron finding its proton and merging with it. The rishis, who are the only beings in our universe who can travel to the sun, have the full power of the Kundalini Shakti at their disposal. They can reach the sun in the instant they will themselves there, thanks to her awesome might. Do you know the speed of the Kundalini Shakti? It's immeasurable. But since the rishis can travel from here to the sun in less than 1 second, its speed must be more than 100 million miles per second. I must have looked at him quizzically, for he emphasized, "Yes, I have been to college and have several degrees, so I know about the speed of light, but there is nothing faster than the speed of thought." The Kundalini Shakti is the highest possible expression of an individual's willpower. When you have purified your will so totally that it can be directed to a single object at a time, coherent just like a laser beam, then the Kundalini Shakti is operating in you, not before. Anything traveling that fast must have tremendous force behind it, and very few people can handle such power. This is why I get so wild when I read about all those people in America who claim either to have had their Kundalinis awakened painlessly, or be awakening the Kundalini all of a sudden and sundry effortlessly. Don't ask me to believe such drivel. If it were so, all of America would have merged with the infinite by now. Restraining his indignation with some effort, he continued, "Why I am so outraged? Because the ordinary individual can best, after long penances, become able to partially self-identify with the universe, or with the deity, Whenever that self-identification becomes perfect, the ego loses all concept of individuality and all contact with the body, which then disintegrates. Once you lose your ability to identify yourself with imperfection, how will you be able to continue to exist in our imperfect world? All the swamis and sadhus nowadays who talk about the awakening of Kundalini are really talking about her partial awakening, whether they realize it or not. You may accidentally awaken your Kundalini partially, or a saint may partially awaken it for you. But that is not the end. It is only the beginning, which is why so many aspirants go astray. A brief pause signified that this applied particularly to me. In an ordinary individual, the ego resides at the lower end of the spinal cord because gravity has full power over her. So long as she lies there sleeping, the individual remains in ignorance. If you want to liberate the ego from her restrictions, you must create a force within your body to counteract the force of gravity. This can only be done by strenuous penance. The purpose of all spiritual practices in every religion is to disengage the ego from her identification with the limited personality, so that she may reunite with her perennial personality. Whether you do it slowly or quickly, you have to rip your ego away from your nerves when you practice Kundalini Yoga, and this will come as quite a shock to your organism. Your ego has such a strong grip on the body that it is impossible for most people to do this. In fact, some die of shock when Kundalini is awakened, and others become severely ill. Indiscriminate awakening of the Kundalini is very dangerous. Everyone is doomed to die, of course, but dying disoriented in pain and fear will ruin your chances for a good rebirth. If your nervous system is strong, it can endure a great deal of Shakti before disintegrating, which is why penance is required. If you do the practices your guru sets for you and control your tongue or your penis or your clitoris, you can create nerves of steel. I'm sorry, but if you think you can dare to awaken Kundalini and survive while living in a body that has been weakened by dissipation, you are living in a fool's paradise. How do you think Moses was able to withstand his experience with God? Only because of his long penances. Moses described a burning bush, which burned but was not consumed. That bush was his own brain and nervous system, ignited by God. Kundalini has been described as Vidyut Lata, the lightning creeper. Think of how a creeping vine clings to a tree, and then think of that vine as a lightning stroke, a bolt of billions of volts of energy, which would splinter or incinerate any ordinary tree or bush. But Moses was destined for greatness, and his nerves, though severely strained, were able to take the sudden flash of pure consciousness that God graced him with. How few are able to do this. If you could just for a moment experience the power of a fully awakened Kundalini Shakti, you would know what bull is being put out by these phony yogis who say that the Kundalini can be felt as a creepy feeling in the spine or as a cool breeze in the palm. Creepy feeling my foot. And to control Kundalini? Do you think it is some sort of joke? Never. For an ordinary human to control Kundalini is impossible, or nearly so. Only immortals can properly control her. No, raising Kundalini in an uncontrolled way is not the answer. You don't become enlightened or become a yogi just because your Kundalini is aroused. There is a great potential for abuse of this power. As long as it goes up, it's fine. But when it falls like a thunderbolt. Like in the Bible where Jesus says, I saw the devil fall like lightning from heaven. Yes, Jesus was talking about the devil of the uncontrolled ego, who tempts us to indulge in the pleasures of the mundane world. Isn't life in the mundane world really hell? And it is an endless torment, because we are reborn into it over and over again. To rise above all this misery, you must raise your Kundalini in a controlled way. Coverings. While Kundalini sleeps in the Muladhara Chakra at the base of the spine, you are awake to the world and asleep to reality. When she awakes to unite with her Shiva in your brain, then you wake up to reality. You fall asleep to the world. An ignorant person believes that he is in the world. His Kundalini self-identifies with the poison of Maya. A jnani, one who knows, says rather, the world is in me, because his Kundalini self-identifies with Shiva. We say that Kundalini is sleeping because she, the ego, is self-identifying with the individual's limited personality. Because of this self-identification, she accepts its limits as her limits. In her pure form, the ego is the purest of Shaktis. But as long as she self-identifies with the body, she lies under 3 coverings which prevent her from remembering who she is and where she belongs. These 3 coverings are the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas, the 6 tastes, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent or spicy and astringent, and the 5 great elements, earth, water, fire, air and ether. The gunas control our minds, the elements shape our bodies and the world around us, and the tastes control our internal chemistry, which links our minds and bodies together. Together with the 10 senses, the 5 we all know, plus the tongue, hands, feet, anus and genitals, there are 24 limitations which distort the human consciousness. Externally, the universal self is covered by Maha Maya, which is the great Maya. Internally, Maya appears as these 24 limitations. The first step in tantric spirituality is to work on the individual scale to uncover the ego and make her reunite with Shiva, the true self. Numerologically, 24 means 2 plus 4 equals 6. The 6 chakras, or energy centers. The 6 chakras are also manifestations of these 24 limitations, which means that only when you go beyond the chakras do you go beyond these limitations, and vice versa. Both are ultimately identical. It is all a question of perspective, of point of view. Now, what is the meaning of the word Kundalini? Kundala means a coiled earring, so Kundalini means the goddess with a kundala. Here, the coil is at the tip of the spinal cord. The ego is coiled because it is tightly constricted by the 3 coverings. So long as Kundalini lies sleeping in the Muladhara Chakra, she is coiled up. And that is why she is sometimes called Kubika, meaning the hunchback. Yes, once she enters the Agnya Chakra though, she completely loses her coils and becomes straight and unencumbered by the 3 coverings. She can express herself fully. Conditioned knowledge is always slightly distorted. Only unconditioned knowledge is truly straight. In Kundalini Yoga, we usually begin with Bhuta Shuddhi, the purification of the 5 elements, to allow Kundalini to travel upwards through the chakras. Bhuta Shuddhi is really the essence of Tantra. The force of her motion, if it is unimpeded, lifts the other coverings and eventually produces simple or ordinary spiritual wisdom, jnana. Jnana is ordinary spiritual wisdom. Jnana is the knowledge that the entire cosmos is really one great being, in spite of the fact that we see multiplicity in the world. All is one, one in all. When you progress from ordinary jnana to the ability to influence the placement or the removal of these coverings on a cosmic scale, creation, preservation and destruction, you have practical spiritual knowledge, a higher stage, which is called Vijnana. The V in Vijnana means Vishisha, meaning special, extraordinary. You are then a Siddha, an immortal, because your own ego has become absolutely purified. Only Siddhas and higher beings like Rishis can possess this sort of practical or specialized knowledge. A Vijnani is something quite different from an ordinary Jnani. After the 3 coverings are removed from Kundalini, your perception becomes quite different. It is this difference between capital I and EYE, I. The I is symbolic of the world of sense objects. As long as the ego is covered, it knows nothing but the senses and their objects and is contented with them. But they are external and therefore impermanent. The ego must be made to realize the capital I, the self which lies within, and therefore the first thing to be cultivated is interiority, withdrawal of the mind from external objects. Love, including orgasm, is internal. If you look for love externally, as most Westerners do, you will either become bored and perverted or frustrated and desperate. Only interiority will give you bliss. Once you develop interiority, your mind will gradually become quiet and perception will develop. Eventually, you will realize that effect, instrument, and action are all one. You will see yourself in the goat being slaughtered, in the act of slaughtering, and in the one who slaughters. When you can see yourself in the butchered, the butchering, and the butcher, you will see that all are mere manifestations of the self. All is his play, capital H. When you see yourself everywhere, where is there any possibility of pity? This is jnana, ordinary spiritual knowledge. To go beyond this to vijnana, you must go beyond the body, and to do that, you must first understand the relationship between the body and the ego. The nerves of the body are the probes, the feelers of the ego. This is what Krishna meant when he talks in the Bhagavad Gita about the tree whose roots are above and whose branches are below. The roots of the nerves are in the brain, and the nerves themselves branch out to cover the whole body. Nadis and Chakras. The ego or ahamkara does not actually reside in the physical body, because the ego is not at all physical. It resides in the subtle body and moves in the nadis, the ethereal nerves. The body's 72,000 nadis act as conduits for prana, which is closely related to the ego. Numerologically, 72,000 means 7 plus 2 equals 9. The 9 doors through which prana can enter or leave the body. Most of the nadis begin or terminate at these doors, which are the sense organs, the 2 eyes, the 2 nostrils, the 2 ears, the mouth, the anus, and the genital organ. Prana, moving with the breaths, enkindles the body's fire, just as a bellows is used to ignite and inflame the fire in a forge. And the mind is carried out through these doors by prana, so that it can experience the world. Control of the nadis enables you to control the ego, the mind, and the senses. Of these thousands of nadis, 3 are most important. The Surya Nadi, meaning sun channel, the Chandra Nadi, meaning moon channel, and Shushumna, the fire channel. The right nostril is related to Surya Nadi, and the left nostril to the Chandra Nadi. Shushumna is closely associated with the spine and spinal cord. So on the physical level, there is a physical structure, and on the subtle level, there is a nadi, and they more or less occupy the same space, so they influence one another. Is that the idea? I could visualize it more or less. Yes, that is close. The sun heats things up, while the moon causes them to cool down. When your right nostril, known as Ganga, the Ganges River, works more efficiently than does your left nostril, your appetites for food and other enjoyments will increase. When your left nostril, also called Yamuna, the Ganga's main tributary, works more efficiently than your right nostril, the opposite effect is produced. Your body cools and relaxes, and your appetites decrease. If you take the trouble to observe your own body, you'll find that each nostril works for about an hour and a half at a time. I had not observed this before, but began to do so at that moment. Continuously throughout the day and night, your body fluctuates from excitation to relaxation and back. Yogis control this fluctuation by performing pranayama. They make the left nostril work when they want to be submissive, when they worship God, for example, and they make the right nostril work when they want to command. They also strive to create a balance between the left and right nostrils, because only when the Surya and Chandra nadis work with equal force can prana be forced into the Shushumna nadi to move Kundalini upward. Pandit Gopi Krishna suffered for weeks from intensely overheated system, when the tornado of prana unleashed by his awakening Kundalini moved exclusively in his Surya Nadi. Only when his Chandra Nadi finally opened and calmed him down again did he get relief. We must distinguish here between Bhuta Agni, the ethereal fire, and Jatara Agni, the digestive fire. Bhuta Agni is predominant. It is Bhuta Agni which causes Jatara Agni to become enkindled. Jatara Agni is in charge of physical digestion, and Bhuta Agni of mental digestion. When you take in new ideas, you eat them. Bhuta Agni digests them so that you can comprehend them. A yogi who has good control over his digestive fire can afford to use his Surya Nadi in his sadhana, because he will direct the energy to inflame Bhuta Agni alone, not Jatara Agni. Ordinary people who stimulate their systems with Surya Nadi will mainly increase Jatara Agni and weaken Bhuta Agni. The nadis meet and connect with one another at ethereal plexuses called chakras. The chakras exist only in the subtle body and are perceptible only to the enlightened mind. But nowadays, everyone who reads a few books writes about the chakras, parroting the tantric descriptions without understanding the inner significance. Very few people have any idea at all of what they are writing. They talk about the chakras, shapes and colors, and speak knowingly about the Sanskrit letters which are present at each chakra, when in fact the only letters that exist at any chakras are the ones you create yourself. I can tell you this though, if you start meditating on your chakras directly, you run a great risk of exciting the nerves and nadis in that area where you have been told the chakra is. For example, suppose some guru tells you, "My boy, meditate on the Muladhara chakra, which is at the perineum." If you have not been thoroughly thought about the Muladhara chakra, if you have not been told what to expect when you get there, most probably you will never locate the chakra. You will merely inflame the nerves in the perineum and intensify the force of apana, which is a downward moving form of prana. This will probably turn you into a sex maniac or some other sort of maniac. There are 5 varieties of prana in the body. Prana, which takes things in, apana, which throws things out, samana, which assimilates, vyana, which circulates and distributes, and udana, which expresses, especially in speech. In this book, prana, lowercase, refers to the generic life force, and prana, capital, that variety of prana which ingests. Each of these forms appears in a different part of the body. Udana in the head, apana in the pelvic region, and so on. Any obstruction to the free flow of these 5 pranas causes imbalance and disease. This is why a good guru is so important. When Kundalini begins to awaken, a tremendous rush of energy is released. Unless the guru is strong enough to control it, the disciple will be overwhelmed with desires and will become strongly attached to worldly things, precisely because the chakras are still blocked. If your sex centers are inflamed, for example, you may become so infatuated with a woman that you will create a jigsaw puzzle to prove that a runana bandhana, meaning bondage of karmic debt, exists between you and her. Probably it does exist, to have caused the attraction in the first place, but it is all imagination until you can remember your past lives, which allow you to actually know the karmic ties. This distortion can happen with any of the lower chakras. You know, I believe that the Tibetans spend their lives reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, which is meant for the Manipura chakra, the seat of the fire element. The vast majority of Tibetans are not perfected yogis, so the main effect of this mantra is to inflame the fire in their physical bodies. This is good for them because they live in a cold country and have very little food to eat, so a strong internal fire helps keep them warm. Those who have plenty of food available to them, however, tend to develop an obsessive desire for food. Even some good lamas become gluttons, thanks to overstimulation of the solar plexus. If lamas who do plenty of hard penances can fall despite all their precautions, what do you think could happen to you if you concentrate on the Manipura chakra in a hot country, or in a country where you have plenty to eat? Probably you would go berserk and eat everything in sight, which would just bind you down tighter to the samsara, the universe of manifested existence. I see what you mean, I inserted, excited with a sudden realization. Some Westerners who practice Tibetan Buddhism swear that their religion requires them to eat meat, but Buddhism believes in non-violence, so that doesn't seem likely to me. It is absolutely ridiculous. They are not talking. Their inflamed appetites, which crave the heaviness of meat, are talking. When you arouse Kundalini before your mind is firmly under control, she will very likely self-identify even more strongly with your limitations, which can wreak havoc with your evolutionary progress. A good guru will close the doors to the lowest 3 chakras so that the Kundalini can never fall back into them. then there is very little danger. Otherwise, the disciple will most likely be overwhelmed with the desire for food, sleep, or sex. The 9 chakras. Most people will tell you that there are 6 chakras. An Aghori will tell you there are 9. To understand the statement, you must at least know the difference between a Nara, meaning man, and a Kara, meaning donkey. If you think this is a joking matter, it is because you are a Kara yourself. I had grinned at the comparison, and now I grinned at this affront. He snorted and went on. A Kara believes only in the 3 lowest chakras, the chakras which are in charge of eating, procreating, and excreting. The long penis of the donkey is a good symbol for those who have big appetites for worldly pleasure. When I told my Roshini, who's his foster daughter, that she needed to get married so that she could be well set in the world, she told me in return, "How can you say such a thing to me when you know that the world is filled with Karas? Would you give your daughter away to a donkey? If you can find a Nara for me, then I will marry. Otherwise, the game is not worth the risk." I was so pleased with her answer that I said, "All right, I will not even make you marry a Nara. I will see that you marry Narayana directly." A Nara lives exclusively in the upper 3 chakras. Only a few Naras exist in the world at any one time, and only a Nara can become a Narayana, God himself, by going to the highest 3 chakras. The lower 3 chakras are for the mundane, the adhibhautika. The upper 3 are for the spiritual, the adhyamika. The final 3 are for what is beyond both the physical and the spiritual. Some people call it the astral. In Sanskrit, we call it the adhidaivaka. These 3 chakras are within the head, and they permit the immortals to remain in their bodies if they can retain Ma's grace. These chakras are secret and cannot be described in the way the other 6 are. They are only experienced, and they can only be experienced after the Kundalini is fully awakened. Until then, there is no use in even discussing them. But I will tell you their names: Golata, Lalata, and Lalana. The first of the 6 chakras which can be described is the Muladhara in the perineum. Then comes the Swadhisthana in the pubic region. The Manipura is at the navel, the Anahata near the heart, the Vishuddhi in the throat, and the Agnya in the center of the forehead. From the Agnya one moves into Sahasrara, which is not a chakra at all. You have heard all of this before, I believe. Yes, I have. So you know that each chakra has the form of a lotus of a particular color with a particular number of petals. Have you ever thought to ask, why a lotus? Why not another flower or something besides a flower? He had me there. No, I have not. He smirked in triumph. Well, the lotus is used as a symbol for purity because, although it lives in mud, it is not soiled by the mud, but rises above it. Thus the analogy of the lotus of discrimination and the mud of Maya. But there is more. The lotus opens only when touched by the morning sun, and closes just as the sun sets. Likewise, the lotuses of the 6 chakras open only when the Kundalini Shakti is present within them. Otherwise they remain closed. Also, even if the sun is shining, a lotus will close if water is splashed on it. You too must learn to be like a lotus in the water. You must close yourself to external influences to prevent the three gunas from disturbing you. Try this when you are full of Shakti and see how hard it is. Each chakra has a different number of petals: 4, 6, 10, 12, 16, and 2 in ascending order, because of the different modes of discrimination which pertain to that chakra. Each petal is a separate bija mantra, meaning seed sound, for that particular chakra. By performing the appropriate ritual with that bija mantra, the knowledge of that mode of discrimination is obtained. The Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus, is at the top of the head. Although it is a lotus, it is not really a chakra because there is no plexus of Nadis there. There is only one Nadi which connects the Sahasrara with the Agnya chakra, sort of like the stem of a lotus. Indeed, the lotus of the Sahasrara has the largest number of petals. The next largest number of petals is in the Vishuddha chakra, which has 16. All of its bijas are vowels, since vowels are the basis of vocalization, which has its origins in the throat, the location of the Vishuddha chakra. Kundalini lies coiled like a snake in the Muladhara chakra. She has 3.5 coils. The 3 refers to the 3 gunas, and the 1/2 to the cobra's mouth, the seat of the ego. It is 1/2 because ego is Shakti, which is only half of Shiva, the Shaktiman or controller of Shakti. The purpose of Kundalini Yoga is to reunite Shiva and Shakti, to create the eternal form of Shiva, Sadashiva. Sadashiva's left side is female and right side is male. The two principles have united, but have not merged. If they were to merge, there would be the end of play, and that would be no fun at all. Sadashiva exists on the cosmic scale. In an individual, this deity is called Ardhana Nisharva, the Lord who is half female. In order to manifest Sadashiva, the Kundalini must be made to rise fully, because the highest manifestation of Shiva in the human being is in the head, the highest part of the body. In an ordinary person, Kundalini is asleep at the base of the spine, and so Shiva is bereft of Shakti. Such a person is not Shiva, but merely Shaiva, meaning corpse. I look at everyone I meet as a skeleton because this is what they are, until a person's Kundalini Shakti awakens and begins to dance on her Shiva. That person is as good as dead. The Nadis and the Chakras. Ascending through the center of the subtle body is the median Nadi of Sushumna, meaning fire, and to the left and right of which ascend the Chandra, meaning moon, and Surya, meaning sun, Nadis, respectively. These channels are described as being 1,000 of the thickness of a hair. The lunar and solar Nadis enter or unite with the Sushumna in the Muladhara chakra, and ascend to the region of the Agnya chakra, where they then descend to the left and right nostrils, while the Sushumna rises to the Sahasrara chakra. From the 2 nostrils extend the channels of prana, which carry the breath to the distance of 12 finger widths. At the base of the Sushumna is the Muladhara chakra, at the perineum, in which Kundalini lies coiled and sleeping with her head sealing the bulb, kada, or entrance to the Sushumna. The Muladhara chakra is described as having 4 petals, plexus of Nadis, and sealed with the square yellow elements of earth. Above this is the Swadhisthana chakra in the pubic region, having 6 petals and sealed with the white half moon of the water element. At the navel is the Manipura chakra of 10 petals and sealed with the red triangle of fire. Near the heart is the Anahata chakra of 12 petals and sealed with the blue hexagram of air. At the throat is the Vishuddha chakra of 16 petals and sealed with the white circle of the element space. At the center of the forehead is the Agnya chakra with 2 petals and sealed with none of the 5 gross elements, but with the subtle essence of mind. At the crown of the head is Sahasrara, the brilliant 1,000-petaled lotus. Each of the chakras described as having various deities and bija syllables at their centers and on each of their petals. It need hardly be said that it is not supposed that there are any actual lotuses or letters engraved thereon. These and other terms are employed to represent realities of yoga experience. The 3 secret chakras of Golata, Lalata, and Lalana are said to be located on the uvula at the back of the throat, above the Agnya chakra, and within the soft upper palate. Their main inner yoga practice is the Kachari Mudra, although Vimalananda possibly refers to a practice even beyond this. In Kachari Mudra, the lingue under the tongue is progressively severed, and the tongue is gradually lengthened by stretching until it can extend to a point between the eyes. The tongue is then turned inward and upward to press on and enter the duct of the 2-headed snake and seal the 10th door within the cranial cavity above the soft palate. The pressure of the tongue on the amakala, the receptacle of lunar nectar, causes the lunar nectar, which is the amrita or soma, to flow downwards abundantly and permeate the entire body with supreme bliss. Attainment of Kichari Siddhi confers a divine body of immortality, which is free from aging, corruption, and disease, endowed with the 8 great magical siddhis. The 2-headed snake is the channel that extends from the back of the throat to the moon, just above the Agnya chakra. The 10th door is the 10th orifice or aperture of the body. The Amakala is the true philosopher's stone of immortality. Raising Kundalini. I had to shake my head in appreciation and agreement. It was so true. To make Kundalini rise from the tip of the spine, you must create enough pressure to force her out of the Muladhara chakra. The upward motion will continue only so long as the pressure remains. Without it, Kundalini drops back down to the bottom due to gravity. Because humans stand erect, gravity acts only on the tip of the spinal cord, not on the whole thing as it does in other animals, whose spines are horizontal or nearly so. This is one reason why it is easier to awaken Kundalini in a human than in an animal. I wanted to ask, how does one go about awakening Kundalini in an animal, but he wouldn't let me get a word in. You might wonder how Kundalini, an ethereal force, traveling in ethereal nerves, can be affected by gravity. Well, gravity must also have an ethereal form, mustn't it? All the 5 great elements have ethereal forms, and gravity is mainly due to the earth element. Ethereal gravity is, in fact, more difficult to overcome than physical gravity. Besides that, as long as Kundalini is asleep, she is completely self-identified with the body, which includes the nervous system. So the effect of physical gravity on the nervous system will disturb any attempt to pry her away from physical consciousness. You will never be able to raise Kundalini until you can control the movements of the prana in your body. Kundalini can only leave the Muladhara chakra when prana, which ordinarily moves upward, is made to move downwards, and apana, which usually moves downward, is made to move upward. Only when prana and apana meet and their mouths touch can Kundalini's upward motion begin. And just because you begin to feel some upward movement from the Muladhara does not mean that the chakra has been fully opened. When Kundalini leaves the Muladhara chakra for good, she throws off all connection with the earth element and all accretions of millions and millions of births. These pass through your consciousness on the way out, and you learn all about the earth element. Actually, this is just a review of everything you have learned about Earth in your previous lives. When you gain full knowledge of the Earth element, you can be sure that the Muladhara has become fully activated, not before. When you finally relinquish the Earth element, you must let go of acquisitiveness and greed, the emotions which are based there. Earth is the only solid element, the only thing you can hold on to. When you give up needing to hold on to anything, you can progress. After the Muladhara chakra comes the Swadhisthana, the seat of the water element and of procreation. When Kundalini leaves the Swadhisthana for good, the sadhaka, meaning anyone who practices sadhana, learns everything about the water element. In each chakra you obtain full knowledge of the element it represents, as all the accretions of past experience are dredged up from your causal body. You must conquer lust, the instinctual drive to procreate, before you can move beyond the Swadhisthana. From the Swadhisthana chakra, Kundalini moves up to the Manipura chakra, the seat of the fire element, where metabolism takes place. The lowest three chakras are meant for the mundane world, physical existence. When asked about their future prospects, Indians frequently say that it all depends on what is written in their fate, pointing to their foreheads, where fate is supposed to be written. But fate is not written in the forehead. Fate is simply the sum of all your past karmas, good and bad, and is written in your lowest three chakras. Runanubandhana is strongest here because these chakras pertain to the earth, water and fire elements which possess physical form. Runanubandhana is not so strong with air and ether which have no form. The Manipura chakra is really crucial. There you learn the difference between Jatara Agni and Bhuta Agni. Whenever Bhuta Agni is strong, Jatara Agni must be weak, and vice versa. You only have a certain amount of fire in your system, and you have to choose how it will be used. To progress at sadhana, a sadhaka must progressively convert Jatara Agni into Bhuta Agni. It is very nice for you to learn new things, he said, looking pointedly at me, but you must be in a position to digest what you learn. If you are not able to do so, you will vomit back all the knowledge, which is Shakti, and your last condition will be much worse than your first. When you try to take in too much energy before your Bhuta Agni becomes strong, much of that undigested energy gets converted into anger, the emotion that is characteristic of the fire element. The main reason for this indigestion is the element of doubt. Until your doubts are removed, you will ask questions like, why should it be like this or that whenever I tell you anything? Just experience it and you'll know about it. There's no other way. Without personal experience, there just can't be firm understanding. This is another reason why I never teach anyone. How can I teach? People spend all their time trying to understand by asking questions, and most of them don't even know which questions to ask. I was on the point of asking a question, so I refrained. Why doesn't anyone ask about the Granta Bidhana, the piercing of the knots, which obstruct the free movement of Kundalini in the Nadis? There are 3 principal knots: the Brahma Granthi, the Rudra Granthi, and the Vishnu Granthi. Kundalini cannot be completely awakened until she pierces these knots. What? Where are they? Ah, now you ask, he laughed. We'll talk about it sometimes. I suspected as much. Some people blame almost all physical and mental diseases on blocked chakras, I continued. Does that have anything to do with these knots? It does, but not in the way they think. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. The chakras exist in the subtle body, and their connection to the physical body is very subtle. It is true that both the physical and subtle pleasures may become blocked, but in most people the Kundalini is fast asleep in the Muladhara chakra, and their chakras are absolutely closed and pay no part in their day-to-day lives. It is because everyone's chakras are blocked that Kundalini yoga is so necessary. As long as you are full of attachments to your life, your consciousness will never be able to get close enough to any chakra, even to smell its fragrance, much less experience it. But in a way, what these people say is true. If you try to take on too much Shakti before removing these knots, the Shakti will get blocked along the way, and then either your nervous system will overload and collapse, or all the energy will be vomited out into your system and you will go berserk. Shakti magnifies and expands everything, including especially attachments. You need good guidance at every step of the way, or down you will go, dive bombing back into the samsara. Above the Manipura chakra is the Anahata chakra, the first of the upper 3 chakras, which are meant only for spiritual activities like sacrifice. The Vedas enjoin the performance of sacrifice, and today many priests loot in the name of the Vedas, performing sacrifices without knowing why, just to make money. The Sanskrit word for sacrifice is yajna, which is a word of 2 syllables, ya and jna. Jna, of course, stands for spiritual wisdom, jnana. Yam is one of the chief bija mantras for the Anahata chakra. This suggests that a yajna involves ethereal worlds, which is very true. In fact, one of the main purposes of a yajna is to feed and satisfy various ethereal beings with the fragrance of the smoke from the various burnt offerings. It also suggests that Puta Agni rather than the Jatara Agni is to be used in a yajna, and that only a person whose Puta Agni is truly enkindled can perform a yajna. When you move into the Anahata chakra, the chakra of the air element, you learn all about ethereal beings, the spirits of the air, which move about just like the wind does. Anahata means unstruck. At the Anahata, you begin to hear the Anahata Nada, the sound which does not arise by striking. Associated with the Anahata Chakra on the right side of the chest, there is a little organ referred to by its size, the thumb-sized person. It is most useful. It acts as a universal translator. You can understand any language with its help because it provides a simultaneous translation into your mother tongue. Language is sound, and sound moves into air. When you learn all about air, you develop a comprehension which is good for all languages. From the Anahata Chakra, the Kundalini moves into the Vishuddha Chakra. Vishuddha means especially pure, and here you gain knowledge of the ether element, the subtlest and so purest of the 5 great elements. You also go beyond the 6 tastes, since taste is only a permutation of the 5 elements in food. All that remains to obscure the Kundalini now are the 3 gunas. When Kundalini is in the Vishuddha Chakra, your exhalation will move only 2 finger breaths beyond your nostrils, which indicates that your mind has become very calm. You've noticed, I presume, that in great times of anger, at the moment of orgasm, and in other intensely emotional situations, your breathing becomes faster and more forceful, and your mind becomes more chaotic. I thought for a moment and then said yes. Such breathing is useless for sadhana, for which you must have a conditioned mind. Yogis practice pranayama because they know that the control of the breath causes control of the mind. The opposite is also true. Whatever controls the mind controls the breathing. When your mind is well conditioned, Kundalini will move from the Vishuddha Chakra into the Agnya Chakra at the 3rd eye. Its lotus has only 2 petals, indicating only 2 bija mantras, one for Shakti and one for Shiva. Agnya means command. Here Agnya stands for Guru Agnya, instructions from the Guru. Shiva is the world's Guru, and at the Agnya Chakra he can be clearly perceived. Do you know how the tribe of immortal beings, known as Naths, address the Kundalini Shakti? Whore. Yes, whore. They say, "So, strumpet, you have been playing about with others. Now you come to me? You will never be allowed to flirt again." They mean that their individual Shakti, which has been busy self-identifying with all sorts of external sensory objects under the delusion that she is the body, must be forcibly brought up into the Agnya Chakra, where she will only have one to self-identify with, her grand consort, Lord Shiva. At the Agnya Chakra, the breathing is almost completely stopped, because here the shunya state, meaning emptiness or nothingness, begins. In the shunya state, all names and forms become extinct, and all you are aware of is your own individuality. Otherwise, only the void remains. Everything in the universe is contained in the shunya state, in unmanifested form, and you can no longer perceive it. Although people call the shunya state the void, it is not empty, it is full. As long as Kundalini is still concentrated in the lower chakras, even the Vishuddha, there is still danger of self-identification with the body. Once Kundalini rises above the Vishuddha Chakra, there is no possibility of any mundane thought, because there is no longer any Runana Bandhana. any bondage of karmic debt. How can there be? You have gone beyond the 5 elements which compose the physical universe. No physical tie remains. When Kundalini moves from the Agnya into the Sahasrara, the final shreds of identity are lost, and the Sadhaka merges completely with the universal soul. In the Agnya Chakra, there is still duality. The Ardha Risharva, or Sadashiva form, Shiva and Shakti united in one body, but in the Sahasrara they merge completely. All differentiation is lost, and the result is nirvikalpa samadhi. The samadhi state, meaning the state of profound one-pointed consciousness, in which nothing is perceived except the universal soul. All determination and indecision drop away. All fluctuations of the mind disappear. You are finished, gone to the land of no return. Samadhi. I have always said that life is a memory. There are actually 2 types of memory, conscious and unconscious. The conscious memory is very fickle and inconstant. It is directed outwards towards mundane objects, which are temporary, transitory, but seem eternal to the ignorant mind. The unconscious memory is permanent. It has been collecting all your karmas from tens of millions of births without any lapse or distortion. So the unconscious memory is actually conscious, since it perfectly records everything that happens to you, and the conscious memory is actually unconscious. People say, I did it because of the force of circumstance, when what they mean is that they were not conscious enough to remember not to yield to the pressure of all the karmas encouraging them to do it. The result of the above is Maya. Through sadhana, you can make the conscious memory truly conscious, and you can return the unconscious memory to unconsciousness. When these 2 merge, the result is the superconscious memory, the consciousness of reality, and in that state you exist in the causal body. Then you must go even further, from Vijnana to Ananda, the unlimited bliss of pure existence. When the last shred of ego is dissolved, only awareness is left, nirvikalpa samadhi. Ordinarily, no one ever comes back from nirvikalpa samadhi. Once the Kundalini Shakti enters the Muladhara Chakra, the entire earth element must be transformed before she can move to the Swadhisthana Chakra. If even a tiny bit of earth remains untransformed, there will be no further rise. She can remain partly awakened, but she will be unable to awaken completely. This is true for every chakra. When Kundalini finally reaches the Sahasrara, therefore, she has relinquished all connection to the 5 elements, and the soul can no longer remain in the mundane world, where you must be imperfect in order to survive. You cannot last for more than 21 days in nirvikalpa samadhi. If you stay longer, you can never return to your body. For the first 21 days you are in nirvikalpa samadhi, your body does not decay. Not one hair falls. No animal bothers it. No insects disturb it. After that, it begins to decay, because the causal body ceases to exist. Without a causal body, how can the subtle and physical bodies continue to exist? You have become desireless. You can return to earth from nirvikalpa samadhi only if nature has a mission for you. If that is the case, or if you get permission to return to earth to conduct your own research or just to play about, then you must select some karmas with which to self-identify to enable you to drop back into your body. They must be karmas from a tree or a rock or any sort of being, but there is no other way to return. You are like an insect that has escaped its cocoon, a cocoon of karmas. Once a worm becomes a butterfly, it cannot return to wormhood unless it takes on new karmas like Jesus did. Kula Kundalini. If you hope to continue to exist after Kundalini is awakened completely, you must be able to make her go from the Muladhara to the Sahasrara, and then in the reverse direction, or downwards from the Sahasrara to the Muladhara, under perfect control. Prana and Apana are then perfectly united. Apana is represented as a downward pointed triangle, and Prana as an upward pointing one. Their union forms a six-pointed star. We call this freed Kundalini by a special name, the Kula Kundalini. Like every Sanskrit word, the word Kula has many different meanings. Its most important meaning here is supreme consciousness of the universe. It also refers to form, because the job of Kundalini Shakti, the supreme consciousness, is to finitize, to give form and limits. In the astral sense, Kula means family. The Kula Kundalini, the Kundalini once she is uncoiled and straightened out along the 6 chakras, takes the form of the goddess who is meant to be worshipped by the family into which you have been born. Kundalini is by herself formless and pure, but when she moves through the body, she must be qualified, possessed of attributes, so she takes the form of one of the great goddesses and guides you. The particular form she takes is determined by your ancestry. Then you realize why you were born into a particular family, which allows you to understand your karmic debts, which in turn gives you knowledge of your past births. Take my own deity, Smashantara, for example. The word Tara comes from a root, meaning, among other things, to swim. You know that when you swim, you must remove all your clothes. To swim across the ocean of samsara, you must remove all the clothes of your attachments. This is one reason why Tara is always showed naked, except for severed arms and heads, which represent the karmas and emotions that clothe you, preventing you from seeing her in her full, unalloyed purity and beauty. Tara is meant to be worshipped only by the select few who need to worship her to fulfill their destinies. Only they are fit to worship her, only they can succeed. If this sounds complicated, and he could see that it did, it is because it has a lot to do with your heredity and the state of your consciousness. As long as your ego self-identifies with your body, your consciousness resides in your brain and is affected by the chemical environment there, which is influenced by the tastes in your diet and by the hormones produced by the brain cells. The hormonal pattern is determined by your genes and chromosomes, which are in turn determined by your ancestors. You told me a few days back that scientists have discovered a gene which produces a protein which causes depression. These scientists have a long way to go yet. They will find that many previously unsuspected things are included in our hereditary material. One of the main differences between ordinary humans and rishis is that rishis can play about with the genes and chromosomes, and we humans cannot. Your genes and chromosomes determine which rasas you can manufacture yourself, and which you have to imbibe from the world. When I say rasa, meaning flavor, I mean both the physical tastes of your food and your emotional tastes or tendencies. If your guru gives you the correct form of Ma to worship, you can, by obtaining her Shakti, perfect your personality, which involves bringing your brain chemistry into perfect balance. Then it becomes very easy to merge with the infinite. Does Rasa Vidya, meaning tantric alchemy, which I have been studying in Ayurveda, also help with this? Of course! That is the whole purpose of Rasa Vidya. Rasa Vidya is a sadhana by means of which you gain control over your rasa and transmute it into Madha Rasa, a transcendental flavor within you. Oh my, no one talks about this at the Ayurvedic college, I complained. No one knows about the real Rasa Vidya over there, my boy, he said, and returned to making his point. The followers of Tantra who perform this practice of making Kundalini into Kula Kundalini are called Kulas. When the ordinary sadhaka's Kundalini is awakened, the experience is so overwhelming that nirvikalpa samadhi is followed by cessation of individual experience. But with Ma's grace, Kulas deliberately come down to duality again and remain in those final 3 chakras there that I mentioned earlier, Golata, Lalata and Lalana. What they do here I can't tell you, but think about this. Krishna lived as a cowherd in Gokula. Go plus Kula, the family of cows, when he was young, and he herds the cows, meaning sense organs, of those of his devotees who reach him in Goloka. The head is Gokula itself, a family of sense organs. Goloka cannot be described. It can only be experienced in one of these chakras. After you become Kaula, Abhisheka, meaning ritual initiatory bath, is performed on you to make you Maha Kaula. But mind you, you become eligible for Abhisheka only when you surrender yourself completely to your Guru. Only when you are completely empty can you be filled with Shakti. The liquid used for Abhisheka is first charged with mantric energy, so this Abhisheka is a kind of Shatipat Diksha, initiation by transfer of Shakti, and it permanently alters your personality. In India, a king or Raja used to be given a Raja Abhisheka in order to fill him with sufficient Shakti to govern well. This practice was not limited to India, mind you. Jesus' baptism by John the Baptist was a kind of Abhisheka, as was the ancient Hebrew practice by which kings were anointed by prophets. When the Kundalini of a Mahakaula is completely awakened, he becomes Maha-Atharvan. Maha means great, immense, cosmic. Maha-Atharvan is he who has gone beyond the limitations of the Atharva Veda, which is the source of Tantra. As I tell you constantly, the results you can achieve with the Vedas and Aghora are exactly the same, only the paths differ. In spite of all this explanation, you may still wonder, just what exactly is the Kundalini Shakti? Shakti is Shakti, whether it is the Kundalini Shakti, Chit Shakti, Maya Shakti, or some other Shakti. Energy is energy. Einstein tried for 25 years to prove it with a unified field theory, but he couldn't do it because he didn't look deep enough. He was stuck in the physical universe. To fully understand the Kundalini Shakti, you must go beyond her external manifestations, for which sadhana is necessary. The snake. As Joseph Campbell documents in his book, The Inner Reaches of Outer Space, the force that the Tantras call Kundalini has been represented as a serpent in many world cultures, including the Sumerian, Chinese, ancient Irish, Aztec, and Greek, the Caucasus. Images of Kundalini as the serpent power predominantly reflect her power of possessiveness of Maya. Indian cosmology describes 7 netherworlds beneath the surface of the earth in which dwell asuras, the selfish or jealous gods, and nagas, semi-divine snake beings. In the microcosm, the surface of the earth is the Muladhara Chakra. Dwelling beneath the earth's surface means living wholly in objective reality, within the realm of Maya, which is the skin of the universe. So long as Ahamkara predominates within you, Kundalini exists for you as a snake. After Kundalini has been awakened and controlled, the once deadly snake turns protector, Vimalananda explains. Snakes are usually poisonous, and as long as your ego, which is a fragment of the Kundalini Shakti, self-identifies with your body and your limited personality, you will be full of the poison of the samsara, which is the poison of selfishness. Once Kundalini frees herself of all limitations, that poison is transmuted into Amrita, the nectar of immortality. The Jain religion talks about 24 Tirthakaras, or Ford makers. A Tirthakara is one whose Kundalini has successfully passed through all 6 chakras. 24 equals 2 plus 4. Who learned how to ford the river of samsara, to pass over from imperfection to perfection, the other shore of existence. In Jain iconography, some Tirthankaras are always represented with a serpent hooding their heads. That serpent is a symbol for Kundalini, the serpent power, and the fact that it is above their heads shows that their Kundalinis have entered the Sahasrara. The serpent acts as an umbrella for the Tirthankara here. An umbrella indicates protection. Such beings are protected from pollution by reason of their fully awakened Kundalinis. The snake above the head of the Tirthankara has filled that Tirthankara with Amrita, and if you follow him, you can obtain that same Amrita, as well as the bliss of nirvikalpa samadhi. Sometimes you see Buddha depicted with a snake as well. The meaning is the same. And Vishnu, of course, sleeps on Sheshanaga, the cosmic serpent. Although the snake is regarded as demonic in the mainline Judeo-Christian tradition, the Gnostics believed that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was trying to free Adam and Eve from bondage to a limited world god, and to give them the knowledge of the Absolute. Vimalananda, who refused to entertain the concept of original sin, also regarded the story of Adam and Eve as a Kundalini myth, a representation of the descent of consciousness into matter. Because Kundalini's self-identification with matter is essential for embodied life, Vimalananda argued that Adam and Eve first had to leave the Garden of Eden, that they might eventually consciously return to the perfected state. Jesus himself used snake imagery when in a conversation with Nicodemus in John 3:14. He likened himself to the serpent of bronze elevated by Moses in the wilderness. Numbers 21:5-9. And Campbell's book reproduces a striking image, possibly originating from the Ophitic tradition. Ophius equals serpent in Greek. Of Christ as a serpent on the cross, flanked by 2 thieves. It does not seem unreasonable to draw a parallel between this image and that of Sushumna, filled with Shakti, flanked by the Chandra and Surya Nadis. Another implication of Kundalini as a serpent: as long as she sleeps, you and your temporary personality can remain ignorant and healthy, but once you rouse her from her slumber, you must either digest her venom or die. There is no alternative. Only if you are ready for such a jolt as Moses was, will you survive her? In biblical times, it is said that a priest would enter the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple in Jerusalem once yearly, bells on the hem of his robe, and a rope tied around one leg. An unconsecrated priest would not survive. The bells would testify to his calamity, and his body would be dragged out with a rope. Some would say that God killed him, when in fact he killed himself by pouring God's Shakti into his unprepared nervous system. The chakras. Even though the chakras of the subtle body have been identified by other cultures, such as the ancient Egyptian and the Navajo, they have never been directly introduced into popular religion, for good reason. Having our Kundalinis unawakened and our chakras closed is a form of protection. Existence is possible for embodied beings solely because their chakras are normally blocked. In fact, many Kundalini-generated disorders are due not to the blockage of a chakra, but to the lack of blockage thereof. The delusion that the chakras are the cause of physiological imbalances stems from the confusion that exists between the chakras themselves and the other structures that exist in association with them. The chakras mentioned above, the Muladhara and the rest, function only when Kundalini moves within them. At all other times, what functions is their corresponding but more superficial structures. Arthur Avalon comments that, from an objective standpoint, the subtle centers or chakras vitalize and control the gross bodily tracts, which are indicated by the various regions of the vertebral column and the ganglia. The plexuses, nerves, and arteries and organs situate in these respective regions. It is only therefore, if at all, in the sense of being the gross outer representatives of the spinal centers, that we can connect the plexuses and so forth with the chakras spoken of in the yoga books. In this sense, only the whole tract, which extends from the subtle center to the periphery, and with its corresponding bodily elements, may be regarded as the chakra. From Serpent Power, page 161 to 162. The chakras are the knots that bind Ahamkara into self-identification with the substances that make up the universe. Each of the lower 5 chakras is the place where Ahamkara and one of the elements meet and interact. The chakra plugs Ahamkara into the frequency of that element, in effect broadcasting that element into the organism's consciousness. Ahamkara continues to recognize and manipulate that element within the body only as long as this connection remains intact. Conscious effort to open the chakras, such as visualizing them and repeating their bija mantras, may cause one or more of them to open prematurely, which will disrupt Ahamkara's ability to manipulate that element within the organism. Once these knots are untied, it is as difficult to retie them while cosmic energy is flooding the system as it is to mend a hole in a dam while millions of tons of water are trying to flow out through it. It is always preferable for the chakras to open on their own when they are ready to open, which happens once Kundalini's 3 coverings have been removed through sadhana. Kula Kundalini. The 4th, 5th, and 6th chapters of the book 1 Samuel describe the capture of the Philistines and the eventual return to Israel of the Ark of the Covenant. While it is difficult to draw direct correlations between otherwise unrelated ancient cultures, it is striking to note that during the period that the Philistines possessed the Ark, the idol of their god, Dagon, was mysteriously toppled and disfigured, and the entire population was struck low with hemorrhoids. It would certainly seem that neither the Philistines nor their gods could digest the Ark's Shakti. When they consulted their diviners, They were told to return the ark to Israel with a trespass offering consisting of 5 golden hemorrhoids and 5 mice, also made of gold. Is it a coincidence that hemorrhoids appear in the physical body near the location of the Muladhara chakra? Or that the mouse is the vehicle of Ganesha, the lord of the Muladhara? Or does this imagery reflect similar subtle realities? Siddhi means success at sadhana. While a siddha is technically anyone who succeeds at sadhana, Vimalananda used the word siddha exclusively to mean one who has achieved immortality and supernatural powers as a result of sadhana. The freeing of Kula Kundalini is a sort of siddhi, though it may not necessarily make one immortal. Kula, which also means totality, the giving up of egoism, and the road of Shushumna, is Shakti, the manifested universe, while Akula, Shiva, is the absolute unmanifested. Akula maintains that since Shiva without Shakti is inert and may not even exist, the two are perforce equal in our world. In the human body, as in the universe, consciousness may come down from on high, but it must be manifested from the bottom up. Adam and Eve must leave the garden if the world is to flourish. Creation occurs when Kundalini projects from Akula into Kula, and destruction when she returns to Akula. It is in this context that Kundalini is called a harlot, because she alternates between union with creation and union with Shiva. Unless your Kundalini is under your conscious control, these two states fluctuate so fast that they seem to exist simultaneously. Vimalananda's reference to the family in which you have been born is not limited to one's consanguineous family. Yoga is meant to make every home a happy home. When every family member is giving out his or her best to unite the family and make it a success, that is real yoga. And I don't mean the family you were born into or married into necessarily. Whomever you live with is your family. As we say in Sanskrit, Vasudeva Kutumbam, we are all members of God's family. From Aghora, page 43. The idea of a Kula as a family of like-minded sadhakas who, after reforming their errant kundalinis, follow similar paths toward reality, may have been inspired by the Vedic idea of Gotra or lineage. A Gotra is a cow pen, a protection for the cows, because a group of families from a single lineage used to protect its cows together in a single pen. The word came to refer to the lineage itself. Gotra also means protection for the senses. Each Gotra originated from a rishi, its members sharing genes and chromosomes which would enable them to easily succeed at a particular variety of sadhana. Perhaps as time passed, it became more difficult to transmit one's spiritual lineage directly to one's child via the Gotra system, and so the Kula system arose. Only a few genealogical families in India have preserved their spiritual lineages. Most teachers like Vimalananda find that their spiritual children come to them from other biological parents.